Hello, and welcome to F1 with my uncle for the race recap of the Australian Formula One Grand Prix. I'm Matt and joined by my uncle, Dan. Eventful weekend, huh?
I would say so, Matt. That was very eventful.
Yeah, I mean we had excitement from practice all the way through to the end of the race. Like sometimes there's boring races, but I think this year is stacking up to be quite exciting. Every single event has been
Absolutely, absolutely.
super exciting. So
These are new cars. The teams are in different places. There's new
yeah.
challenges, and I have to say, maybe it's just me. Maybe I like this race. I like Albert Park, but I thought qualifying especially was almost more exciting than the race to me. Lots of twists and turns.
Yeah, yeah. It's most maybe I'm just spoiled because I only started in F1 in 2019, and that was just one era, and it was pretty much the order didn't change a whole lot until last year.
Yeah,
But it just seemed like most qualifying sessions were just kind of snooze fests. Like nothing crazy happened. The people qualified where you would expect them to. But it seems like
right.
there's something weird going on in every qualifying, and particularly this weekend. It was pretty crazy.
Yeah, during the peak of the Mercedes dominant years, there's times I would just actually fast forward. I would skip Q1 and Q2 and fast forward to Q3. I
Yeah.
might check the very end of the others to see the results in case there was something really outlandish, which there rarely was. And then I would go to Q3 and watch the last 5 minutes of Q3 is the most, to me was the most eventful. That isn't necessarily the case anymore.
No, and honestly, I didn't even watch qualifying until like every race until last year when there was actually a threat of Max doing something crazy. But let's not get too carried away on that. Let's firstly about the track. It's been a couple of years since we've been there. It was 2019, which was actually the
Yep.
first season that I started watching F1. And there was the season opener, and I don't have a whole lot of memories from that because it was the first race that I ever watched, and I didn't watch qualifying. I didn't really know what I was watching that much. But the track has been pretty heavily redesigned since then. And I'm just curious, you've obviously been watching since what, the 80s?
Yep, yep, the mid to late '80s. There's a few years when, my kids were little, I didn't get to watch as much, but for the
Right,
most
right.
part, very, very dedicated from the early 2000s on. So, the course was a little bit more of a road course. It's always been a beautiful setting there in Melbourne. The people come out for it. It's an exciting track. The drivers like it. It is one of the favorites on the calendar. But they did have tighter turns, more S's, and they've opened the track up a bit this year, which, frankly, I think is a good idea.
Really?
And
Okay.
I do
I
kind
have
of like
mixed
that.
feelings, but
Yeah, I can see why the tighter turns makes it, it produces a different dynamic, but uh, the kind of a trend in sports is fast paced these days. Even in baseball,
yeah.
they're trying to make everything quicker. So I
Maybe that
think
should
it
be a
follows
topic
that.
for its own video of just
It
is
could be
faster
actually.
track or faster tracks better. But there's something
Mhm.
about the tight technical stuff. Maybe it was because the passing hasn't been as good in the tighter technical stuff. I don't know, but it seems to
Yeah.
reward skill a lot more, whereas these
Well, let's put a that's something I want to come back to as we
yeah.
talk about the race because
Yeah.
I saw some evidence that would seem to it would seem to contradict a little bit the what was the motivation that was behind the redesign of the cars,
Yeah.
and we'll get into that later. But
Yeah, yeah. And, I think the redesigns overall were there. I did hear some of the drivers having a little bit of concern prior to the weekend about it, but
mhm.
it seemed like after practice, everybody was pretty positive about it.
Right, right.
I have a few notes here about practice. Firstly, Ferrari and Red Bull, unsurprisingly, were at the top of the charts, with Ferrari having the edge. McLaren seemed potentially to be better with Lando on the top of the charts in the last session, which was good. Mercedes were continuing to struggle, and both drivers were effectively saying in interviews that the issues aren't going to be easily resolved,
Hmm.
which I thought was interesting. Haas seemed to be struggling quite a bit, which is unfortunate. Like I got really excited when they had really good results in the first two races, but then crazily, both Aston drivers crashed out in free practice three.
Yes, that
which
is
is
true.
unusual. I mean, I don't know, but I wouldn't have expected that from Vettel. But he's also only had like at that point like an hour in the car ever, so that's
Right,
not
and
great.
that is
But
true, and the cars, I think, are mostly undrivable, and you have an
yeah,
old veteran who's frustrated by that, and
yeah,
a new guy who is going to take longer to really adapt to the car, so,
yeah.
yeah, that and with a bad car, you're taking a risk there, yeah.
Yeah, true. But then last point about practice, and this was true throughout the entire weekend, even the race, was that there was absolutely gnarly porpoising from the Ferrari. However, it didn't
Yes.
really seem to be an issue because they were pretty much dominant and untouchable all weekend. But like they didn't seem to have much issues with porpoising, and they were definitely the worst this weekend out of any team, even more than the Mercedes, which had really bad porpoising.
Yeah, that was one of my notes to cover from Q1, frankly. When they showed the driver in the cockpit, which they didn't show a lot during the race, but in qualifying, when they
Yeah,
showed his view, he was literally bouncing up and down 2 or 3
yeah.
inches. His helmet was the top of the helmet. That's not healthy for the driver
Nope.
if that keeps up. But the car, in my opinion, looked borderline dangerous
Yeah.
because you could lose control if you've got that much porpoising. And this is strictly in a straight line. In the corners, they're rock solid. But in the fastest part of the straights, that driver is bouncing up and down like crazy. And I'm telling you, that does things to your vision. You can't really see what's going on when you're bouncing like that. And the car looked undrivable to me, which
Yeah.
apparently was not the case. But it made me nervous to see it, and I just thought, man, this and Red Bull does not do that.
No, the Red Bull doesn't porpoise at all, which
No,
is pretty crazy. I
no.
think
But yet,
yeah.
Ferrari obviously did well this weekend. So.
Yeah. I think it was really smart of them to remove they initially had 4 DRS zones, and I think it was really smart of them
Yes,
to remove that 4th one because it was on that it's technically classified as a straight even though it curves.
yes,
And I think that's where they removed the DRS zone, and I think that was really smart because,
yeah.
I could see that back wing opening up on a Ferrari, and they just bin it into the wall at, like, 200 miles an hour. Like, that's
Right, right. What they did is they have 2 DRS detection zones, but they had 4 DRS zones, and they effectively moved what was the 3rd of the 4th. They removed number 3
okay.
and left 4 there. So the final DRS zone right before you come around the corner to go to the front straight that's the one they left, and they got rid of the other one, which I think is a really good idea.
Yeah.
I agree, and our friend Peter Windsor, not truly our friend, but we're both
I wish.
we both really we both have a lot of respect for Peter. He
Yeah.
felt the same way,
Yeah.
and he brought attention to that during the week, and joked that maybe they removed it after watching his video, but I think it was the right thing to do. So
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. All right, so qualifying. Let's get into Q1, which was surprisingly eventful. My
Oh
God.
yes, that was that. Yeah, the hits kept on coming in
Yeah.
Q1. So
Yeah.
there were some very interesting aspects to it. So,
Yeah.
and there was one event I alluded to earlier that you and I had a disagreements of opinion on, and I'm dying to talk this one out. I
Yes.
doubt that we're going to agree, but
Well, I think
completely.
we'll agree a little bit more than we were initially.
Okay, good.
I okay, so for let's just jump right into that since we're already talking
Okay,
about it. So
okay.
in Q1, the Astons had both crashed and they were scrambling to get them put back together. They barely got Stroll's put back together, and he went out to set a lap. I think he maybe set a banker lap. I'm not sure, and he was then on a cool down lap or something and there was a miscommunication. Latifi was told that he was on a hot lap and to get out of the way, so he does. And then Stroll passes him, and Latifi sees that he's not on a hot lap, and then he goes because he's like driving really slowly, and so then Latifi goes to pass him back immediately. Stroll is not watching his mirrors, turns into Latifi, big crash, both cars get pulled out, red flag.
Yeah, that's so and based on our, kind of the conversations you and I had, I can imagine there's a lot of people watching this that don't understand, you know, even on I make notes during the race.
Yeah,
I do like a voice memo. And as soon as I saw it, I go, oh, Stroll's going to be penalized for this. This
yeah,
was his fault. And so here's my thinking on this. And here's the things that went through my head is qualifying and racing are two completely different events. And so in qualifying, here's what's going on. The teams are testing, especially in Q1. They're testing different things of the car. They could be testing tires. They're testing fuel loads. They want to warm up. They don't want to warm up. So, like for example, in Q3, it's typical to send a car out with a light fuel load if you're vying for like pole position or top position.
Right.
And in fact, most of them do that. But another factor to that is, do they want to make 2 hot laps or 1? If they have 2, they have to put more fuel in the car. So the second one's almost always faster because so at any point in time, you have somebody slowing down, and they could be testing, the roll-on power in second gear, third gear, fourth gear. They could be doing something that an engineer wants to see that requires the car to go slow. They could be preserving tires. They could be more often than not, though, the reason is they're waiting for position on the track. If they slow down for a little bit, their team is telling them, okay, hit it now. You'll have a clean track through, the first 10 turns, and then you'll have some traffic to deal with. So there's potentially 20 cars on the track, and all of them are doing something different. So it absolutely requires a focused attention.
True.
And this is something that Stroll has struggled with in the race and in qualifying previously. This is something he has to work on. So here's what happened. Latifi, I don't remember if he was told by his team that Stroll was on a hot lap,
He
but I
said that
know
in an
that
interview. Yeah.
okay, I knew that he said he saw Stroll coming up fast. And he may have been told he was on a hot lap, and Stroll was going fast. Latifi was not. So Latifi moved far to the left, gave Stroll a ton of room. So Stroll then assumes the racing line Latifi then moves back over to the racing line because he is now starting. He wants to pick up the pace with his car and start doing practice or, qualifying. So Stroll at that point, though, backed out of his lap for whatever reason. And he was off to the left on the non-racing line of the corner that was coming up. And so it was extremely legitimate for Latifi to go, oh, okay, he backed off on his lap for whatever reason, and he's moving over to let me through because now Latifi's going fast. And frankly, if it wasn't Latifi, it could have been somebody else. It could have been
Yeah.
somebody on a flyer like Hamilton or Bottas or anybody.
Yeah.
So Latifi takes off on his lap, assuming that Stroll moved over move to the left off the racing line to let fast drivers through. And right in the middle of the darn corner, he pulls over and clips his rear wheel and absolutely destroyed his car.
Yeah.
And, which is dangerous. And if he had checked his mirrors, it wouldn't have happened. And
Absolutely.
that's Stroll's. And so that's how I saw it right off the bat to me,
Yeah.
because it was qualifying. If it's racing and you're fighting for a corner, it could be a racing incident. But in qualifying, that's actually what went through my mind after seeing a million races. I could see that's what went on. The stewards apparently agreed. They hit him with a 3-grid penalty for the race, and they added 2 penalty points to his super license. So
Right.
now he's up to a total of 7, at least before today.
Right.
There might even be more at the end.
Yeah.
So that's how I saw it.
Yeah, no, that's all perfectly, like, that's clearly the case because that's what the stewards agreed with. It's just when I was initially watching it, you and I were texting back and forth and disagreed wildly because I was looking at this going, here's Latifi driving erratically. Or rather, not erratically, in a completely unexpected way. He pulls over completely off the track. Like he wasn't even on the track, he was on the runoff. And Stroll goes by. And to me, if I'm Stroll, I just passed a guy who's on the runoff. I don't know what he's doing. He's not on the track at all. I'm no longer thinking he's behind me. There's no reason for him to come flying by me again. And so he wouldn't, to me, Stroll never would have expected Latifi to come flying by like 3 seconds later. And now, granted, Stroll should have been watching his mirrors. I did some looking up after qualifying and just looking on like Reddit and other places what people were saying. And Stroll has a terrible habit of not looking in his mirrors.
Yeah,
and so,
he does.
Given that, I'm much more inclined to say, yeah, Stroll's fault. But to me, you gotta say that like Latifi was like he let Stroll by and then immediately passes him again. And it was
Well,
just
he
that's just
assumed
weird.
that I think he assumed he was gonna follow him at speed
Maybe.
because that's what was gonna happen. It's not it was Stroll slowing down that caused the confusion. It was
Yeah.
actually there's 2 ways to look at it. It was Stroll past instead of saying it was Latifi going slow then fast, my opinion was it was Stroll flying past him and then in essence stopping, flying
Yeah.
past him and then slowing down. That's what created the problem because Latifi's job is to stay out of the way of anyone on a flyer, which he did in his
True.
mind. And then he goes, "Oh, he's on a push lap or whatever. He's slowing down." So then, so he comes out and he goes, "Well, I got to get going." So he hits it, assuming that now he's free because Stroll's going to be off the racing line.
Yeah.
And
But yeah, at any rate, like I
yeah,
just saw it as really weird behavior from Latifi and not exclusively Stroll's fault, but I'm perfectly fine with being wrong. The stewards know more about it than I do. Let's go ahead and move on.
and maybe your uncle. All
Maybe
right,
that's the jury's
let's
still out
move
on that one.
on.
Um, yeah. So qualifying in general,
There was one more issue from Q1 I wanted to bring up.
yeah. Go for it.
There was an uncharacteristic mistake by Mercedes in Q1. Did you catch it?
I did see all throughout qualifying that both Russell and Hamilton were struggling to keep the car on the road.
No,
Um,
there was actually a timing issue by Mercedes. They actually made a mistake in Q1, like an uncharacteristic for
oh,
Mercedes
I
mistake.
seem to remember that. Was it that like the last flying lap that
Yes,
they tried to make? They didn't even make it to the line in time.
exactly. They missed
Yeah,
it by just a few seconds or 10
yeah,
seconds or something. But they both went out assuming that they would get to the line in time before the clock ran to 0 to start a flyer, and they didn't make it in time, and
yeah,
they didn't get the cars out in time, and
yeah.
that's very interesting to me
It
because
is.
you don't see Mercedes making those kind of mistakes on a regular basis, but in the
Well, they
last
in fairness, they made a lot of mistakes last year, and
yeah, oh, they did.
I think you and I have talked about this before, but I think
Mhm.
that Mercedes knows how to win really, really well. If they're winning, if they're out in front, if they're unchallenged, they just blow everyone else out of the water.
Right.
But once they start to face pressure from people, it's like they just completely melt down and they don't know what they're doing. And we saw like in 2019 and 20, I didn't see like a single mistake from Mercedes until there was the George Russell Bottas mix up in the secure Grand Prix at the end of
Yeah, there
2020.
were a few driver mistakes. Hamilton made some mistakes in
But like
2019, but
strategy
yeah.
and these timing things, you would never see that. And then
Right.
suddenly last year when they've got a whole bunch of pressure from Red
Mhm.
Bull, they start making a lot of mistakes. And then this year where they're not out and out leaders, they're making a lot of mistakes. We've seen that in every event
Yeah.
this year so
Yep.
far.
I think that observation's correct. The fact that it is happening a little more than it should and used to is true. Why it's happening is speculative, but
Sure. Sure.
I think what I sense is in the other teams that are fighting for position, they're used to getting beat up. And so if there's a mistake, they don't beat themselves up about it. They get over it. They've learned how to get over it. Whoever made the mistake takes his licks and they move on.
Yeah.
But there's a dark cloud over Mercedes right now
Yep.
with because you have two very strong personalities in Lewis Hamilton and Toto Wolff, and
Yeah.
I think they're I don't think they are handling not being on top as well because you can say it's because they haven't had to do this for a while, but the fact is now I will say that Toto Wolff has changed his tone starting this week.
Really.
He's being more humble in interviews. I don't know that translates to the office, so to speak, to the to the pits and the crew, but
Yeah.
he's being a little bit more humble in interviews. He's having to admit it, which I think is good. It's magnanimous. It's about
Yeah.
time. But yeah. Anyway, so I just thought I would point that out. It's kind of a
No, that's
nerdy thing,
fair.
but
I actually didn't get a chance to watch the press conferences and stuff, which I usually like to do. I just didn't get a chance to do that. But yeah, that's a fair
mm,
point. All right, so moving on to like Q2 and Q3, I thought it was interesting that Red Bull topped both Q1 and Q2, and Perez topped
yes,
Q2. And
yes,
Max just was really cranky with his car all weekend, and
He did not have a great car all weekend.
Yeah. But then in Q3, Max was on an absolutely flying lap, and then locked up on the second to last corner and kind of ruined the whole lap. Um,
Are we done with Q2?
unless you had more. Yeah.
I did. I had one thing that we
Sure.
should note, and that was that Valtteri Bottas did not make it out of
Oh
Q2
yeah.
for the first time since, drumroll please. Want to take a guess?
It was something like 100 and something. I don't remember how many races, but
I don't
it
know
was
the
100
number
and
of
something
races.
races. It's
I
like
should have looked it up.
119 or something like that.
It probably something like that. We could add it up, but it's the
Yeah.
first time since Abu Dhabi 2016
Wow.
that he did not make it into Q2.
And that is factoring in things like DNFs or do not starts
Everything,
effectively.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
factoring in everything. He just made it
That's
through,
factoring
and
in the fact that
yeah,
he didn't crash in qualifying since,
right.
you know, he got into Q3 every single race,
Yeah,
all how many ever years since
yeah.
2016. So, hats off to him. I love that guy. He's one of my
Me too.
favorite drivers.
Me too.
Side note, I see a happiness in him at
Yes.
Alfa Romeo that I have not seen in a year or two.
Yeah. The poor
He
guy.
truly likes being there. I think he's good for the team. The team's good for him. I love the guy.
Yeah.
But anyway, so hats off to him. It's a long record.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's the record, but boy, it won't be
It
top for a
probably
while.
is, to be fair.
I
Like,
think so too.
yeah.
It could very well be.
Yeah, I mean Bottas, I really like the guy. I mean, I feel like the environment at Mercedes was not good for him. He was kept getting 1 year contract after 1 year contract, even though he was super consistent for them and like did everything perfectly, everything that they asked him to do. And so I think getting into a place where he is the number one driver
Yeah,
clearly, and he's actually like valued and respected, like that's just a really good environment for him. So I'm
yep,
happy to
for
see that.
sure. And the other thing was that Lewis was complaining that Max was impeding him in Q2.
Oh, yeah, I
And
saw that. Yeah.
at first I thought, oh, that's Lewis being Lewis. But
Yeah, but Max wasn't told he was on a flying lap.
well, that's the other thing. Afterwards, there was a radio transmission where Max honestly goes, was he on a flyer?
Yeah. And then he
And
starts, like,
so it's
cursing because he's like,
entirely, it wasn't bad. It wasn't like they were within 10 feet of each other or anything like that. But that was a mistake on Red Bull's part. They should
yeah,
have given
yeah.
Max that
There
information.
was a
So
lot of communication mistakes all around, it seemed like, especially in
yeah,
qualifying, but
I think when the teams are working through a myriad of mechanical issues, then I
yeah,
think what we're seeing is that communication between the driver and the engineer can take a hit.
yeah.
Okay, moving
All
on to
right.
Q3.
Q3, yeah, Max was on a crazy good lap, locked up his tires and kind of lost the lap there. And then Leclerc and Perez were both able to set really good times, and then Carlos Sainz was on a pretty good lap, and right as he gets it was like 10
Yeah,
yards from the line. The
yes,
red flag came out because Alonso had a mechanical problem.
he went into the wall on him with what turned out to be a mechanical problem. Which,
Yeah,
but and the heck of this is, Fernando was on a flyer. He could have
I
set pole
know,
with that run.
I
And
know.
I'm an old Fernando fan. I love the guy. He's 40 years old, still driving like a 20-year-old. I love this guy.
Yeah,
And his car failed him. Unfortunately, it happens.
yeah,
But I think he could have set now whether he would have how what he would have done in the race, who knows? But he
yeah.
could have set pole. He could have put that car in the front row easily.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of a shame. He
Yep.
recently said in an interview that he'd be happy to continue racing for the next 2 to 3 years, and I'm like, good on you, man. Like,
I think he could do it.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, basically that meant that Carlos didn't set that time because as soon as the red flag comes out, it immediately invalidates the times of anyone that's on a lap.
Yeah,
And so even though Carlos was like literally 10 yards from the line, still invalidated his time, which
it
sucked.
did. Yep. Yeah, it was red flag, so that's it. Racing stops.
Yep.
It's unfortunate.
So once it resumed, I have that Leclerc set a great lap, and Perez
He
set
did.
1.001 behind him. That might have been right before the red flag.
I think it was. It was.
Yeah.
I think the final was he was actually, I think, a half second faster than Max at the end.
No, he was two and a half tenths. It was like two
Okay.
six point 26 something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like a quarter second,
Yeah. So
which is a lot in the F1 world.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But yeah, that meant that Carlos had to, like, he didn't have a banker lap. He had to get a time in.
hmm hmm
And unfortunately, he had two attempts to do it and just made mistakes both laps and ended up qualifying ninth, which is not where he wanted to be at all.
No, Sainz was ninth. That's very unfortunate, but
Yeah.
yeah.
But it meant that Lando, which it seems like McLaren is recovering pretty well, Lando started fourth, which was really good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That's what. Yeah, that's what. That was the first off. Hats off to Leclerc. He drove a perfect lap
Yeah,
when he
so just
left in a
really quickly, right at the end, Leclerc snagged pole with
yeah
Max a little bit behind him, and then
yeah
Perez came in third.
yeah. So I have Leclerc, Verstappen, Perez, Norris, Hamilton, Russell, Ricardo, Ocon,
Yeah,
and then I know that obviously Alonso was P10, and then there's an 8-9 in there somewhere, but or a 9. But
yeah,
well, obviously 9 was Sainz. So
yeah,
yeah, that's how it ended. That was the lineup for the race itself.
yeah.
So
So, all right, I think we've rambled on about qualifying quite a bit. Let's get on to the
yeah,
race, even though obviously it was a very eventful qualifying. Let's be fair.
well,
So
yeah, exactly, yeah, yeah. We probably won't go into this much detail, but we are this time.
probably.
So
All right, so the race. The start was really good for a few people and really bad for a few others. I think
absolutely,
Charles got off really well. Same with
yeah.
Max. They had about an even start, and Leclerc got the corner heading into the first corner. Perez got actually a way better start than both of them, but Max basically shut the door on him, and Perez had to back out, which left the door open for
Allowed
Lewis
Hamilton to pass.
to
Yeah.
to take him. Yeah, so that was
Science,
not good.
science. On the other hand,
Science on the other poor sides. I don't
he
know
had
why they
he.
would start him on the hard tire. Why would they
Well,
do
I don't know
that?
if it was that his clutch settings, the way he handled the launch. I don't know, but
Yeah,
he got past like he was selling flowers at an off ramp at a freeway off
yeah,
ramp. it
yeah,
was sad.
yeah. It was. He lost 5 places on the first lap.
Yeah.
And then on the second lap, he's still, I mean, the hard tires take a little while to warm up. As we saw throughout the race, whenever people were switching to them, it took a while for them to come in. And so maybe they were warmed up by the second lap. I don't know. It's kind of hard to imagine because of they cool off a lot for the start of the race. But he Signs just misjudged a corner entry,
Oh, yes, yeah. That
and
was lap
then
two. Lap
lap 2,
two,
yeah, yeah.
he
And then
beached
he
it, and
just skipped across the grass and then just
yeah,
kinda lost it in the grass and then spun around across the track, barely missing, I think it was, Schumacher, and then just beached in the gravel, and that just was
yeah.
like I was watching that just like, "No, Science, no."
It was definitely one of the red and white cars. Yeah,
Yeah.
he missed one and went in front of another
Mhm.
backward backward across the track.
Yeah.
He was very, very lucky. So that brought
Yes.
out a virtual safety car and
Which
beginning
then
in
turned
lap
into a safety
3.
car. But yeah.
Yeah, and then that period ended in lap 7. So they had 4 laps under the safety car.
Yeah. So unfortunately, that was the race for Signs. It was
Yep.
just the weekend from hell for him. Started off okay, but then in qualifying, he just like I feel really bad for him, but like ultimately, it was his mistakes at every step. It was his mistakes in qualifying. He messed up on 2 consecutive laps, and
Yep.
then he messed up on the second lap, and just and like I love Science. He's one of my like I have like 5 drivers that I really like, and he's one of them. And
Yeah.
so like I feel bad for him because I like him a lot, but at the end of the day, it was his mistakes that caused that situation.
Right. Yep. I think so. The other thing I thought was interesting was following when we went green again in lap 7.
Yeah.
The track the stewards do not enable DRS for until 2 laps have gone by.
Yeah.
And what was very interesting to me in this, I don't know if this is going to mean anything down the road. But Perez was unable to pass Hamilton until DRS was re-enabled. He tried to pass him in the first 2 laps because he's faster
Right.
before DRS was enabled, and he could not do it. And then once DRS was enabled, then he was able to get quick enough to eventually pull it off in a lap or two. So the greater point I was making is these cars with the redesign, they've theorized that perhaps they can do away with DRS because now the car passing is going to be so much easier.
Yeah. And in
Well,
fairness, it is, but
it kind of is, but not in this case.
yeah.
So there are circumstances, at least with some of the cars, where passing is not as easy as we were led to believe it was going to be
Yeah.
this year, at least in some circumstances. So that's
Yeah.
something for us and our audience to pay attention to going forward. Is
Yeah.
is
Keep that
this
in mind.
did
We're going to have a whole video about that over
Right,
the
right,
summer, I
right.
think.
Keep that in mind. Did
But
that really happen? Do we still need DRS?
yeah.
Is it necessary? But I don't think Perez would have. Now, and the reason I bring that up is once Perez got around Hamilton, he took off.
Yes.
So
he
it
did.
wasn't. He had a faster car, but he still couldn't pass him without
Yeah.
the aid of DRS. So just
But what
something
was
to.
interesting though, and this was a theme throughout the whole race, is that Mercedes seems to have actually clawed back a whole lot of race pace because
Mhm.
they didn't have the tire deg that Red Bull had, the
Yeah,
degradation in the tires.
true.
And Red Bull, both cars faced that pretty badly. And Perez, after he passed Hamilton, he got out, 4, 5, 6 seconds ahead of him. But then once his tires started going away from him, Hamilton caught back up, and he was going to pass him if Perez didn't go into the pits to change tires.
Well, and part of the reason, not the entire reason, but part of the reason for that was both Perez and Verstappen flat spotted their tires by locking up at different points of the race. And it
I didn't
just,
notice that. Okay.
yeah, and that track had just destroyed the tire. It
Yeah.
was usually a left front. And then they would complain about greening in the left front. Well, it's like, yeah, you just slid
Okay.
150 to 200 feet on a tire that wasn't moving. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, so if you do a little flat spot, then after a few laps, it wears off. The tire will go. But in this case, it was significant enough that they eventually had to come in for new tires.
Yeah. But yeah, so then Perez came into the pit and Lewis stayed out for a little while and
Hmm.
surprisingly overcut Perez. Typically it gets talked about a lot of the undercut, which is you pit earlier and then on fresher tires you have more pace in hand and you pass them basically through the pits effectively because like you're able to make up more time than they are when they pit and you come out ahead
Right.
after you've both pit. Whereas in this one, Lewis was he stayed out longer and that allowed him to keep the position because he had better pace with the older tires.
Yeah.
So anyways,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Now the other thing I noticed, or the other note I have moving on, was that
yeah,
poor Vettel,
yeah,
he had an off on moment where he went off the track, back on the track, did not do his car any favors. The
nope,
floor looked a little janky after that, in my opinion. But and then that moved him down to P19, and of course P20 was Alonso, who was sitting in the garage. And then by lap 24, he's out of the race,
yeah.
and he had to pull over, which caused another safety car.
Well, Vettel actually crashed.
He
He
crashed. Yeah,
hit the
he
wall.
crashed.
Yeah,
You're right. The initial video showed him pulling over, and they go, "Oh,
yeah,
there must have been a crash with somebody else." And they go, "No, it was just him." But he pulled over to the side of the track, missing a front wing, I believe.
yeah.
And
So
and then
is
yeah,
Vettel washed up or is he just suffering from not having two races in hand like everyone else and having basically no experience in the car?
or does he have an undrivable car? That is
Well, there's
another
that too.
option.
So which is it, do you think?
I don't think he's washed up. He's a four-time world champion. Unless he's dealing with some type of physical ailment or psychological issue that nobody's aware of, it's hard to say he's washed up. He is married with kids now that could be playing into it, but I think a professional would pull himself out of the mix at that point. So I
Yeah.
don't think that's what it is. I think he doesn't have a lot of time in the car. It is a new car. He didn't get a lot of practice in. So yeah, this race was kind of practice for him, but I think he also has an undrivable car. by his
True.
perspective. So,
Yeah, I think after this weekend, Aston is the only team that has no points. So
oh, interesting.
yeah, so that's definitely not good.
No,
But yeah, I don't necessarily think Vettel's washed up. I'm just curious because he's not performed well since um, even that last year in Ferrari. But it's kind of hard to say because they were just so bad as a team.
no,
But
and
he's
that
not
stuff
performed well since
once
he
it
left them.
starts, once this bad luck starts, it can get in your head.
Yeah, that's true.
Baseball they call it the yips.
Well,
Where
in fairness, correcting myself, he did get second in one of their races last year, but then was just disqualified because they couldn't pull enough fuel out of the
oh
car,
that hurts. Boy,
and
does
that
that
just
hurt.
sucks. Yeah.
Yeah, that
So,
that was miserable, and
so yeah. In fairness, Vettel has done really well. I think he had the most overtakes last year, which is a cool stat, but it's also not a
yeah,
good one because that means that you're starting really far back.
yeah.
So,
I'm a Vettel fan.
yeah,
I think he'll do better. He
I'm
is at an
hopeful
age
that he'll
where
bounce back.
hopefully I. The problem is there's a lot of really fast young up and coming
True.
drivers, and the older drivers aren't going to get the fastest rides. Like
Yeah.
he's not good. He's not going to be with Ferrari next year or anything.
Yeah, and I think
Hopefully they get him.
like Daniel Ricciardo when he
Yeah,
moved to Renault, I think that was a mistake, and like that, Vettel
absolute mistake.
moving to what's now Aston was a mistake. I don't think he should have done that. I mean, he didn't really have a seat, which was the problem. Like Ferrari just gave him the boot, so he
Yeah,
didn't have a lot of choices. But that was just not a good team to get into. So
yeah. Who knows?
I don't know,
There's so many variables with these
and you
teams.
can't know that ahead of time. So
No, no,
yeah,
no, you can't. But
but yeah,
it's hard to know. I mean, yeah, yeah. Time will tell on this. Right now, Stroll is squirrely. He
yeah.
needs to grow up. He needs to become a professional.
Yeah, but he's the
Um,
owner's kid, so he's got no pressure to do
well,
that, which is the problem.
that has to get fixed because I guarantee you, with Vettel and the mechanics, that's only going to last so long.
Yeah,
They need to maintain a tight team, so that only goes so long. But yeah, but it is a fact
yeah,
nonetheless. So, um, yeah, that's he's going to have to come down, and
yeah,
Vettel will have to see what Vettel does.
yeah. True. All right, so Vettel's crash brought out the second safety car,
Yep.
and on the restart, Leclerc got a really bad last corner, exit the
Hmm.
last corner, and Max was fully alongside him going into the first corner to start the next lap.
Yes.
But Leclerc was able to hold the corner, and then a lap later, he was a second and a half ahead of Max. So it was a brief peak that Max. I think if Max even was able to pass him there, Le- Leclerc would have just passed him like almost immediately back, because
Maybe. Yeah.
he
It
just had
could
the
have.
pace in
Yeah.
hand. He was just so far out on his own.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah. That could have been the case. But Max was putting in some fast laps.
he
In
was,
fact, I think he had fast lap at the time on the scoreboard
yeah.
during that period. But then we had a problem.
Well, before then, I thought it
Yeah.
was really cool to watch Sergio Perez because he found himself
Mm,
in fifth on the track on the second restart. He was behind
mm,
Alonso and Russell. And during the next 10 to 12, maybe 15 laps or so,
yeah.
he very solidly worked his way up to Alonso and passed him, and worked his way up to Russell and passed him. And I thought that was
Yeah.
just really clean, really solid driving from Sergio. And I think obviously seems to really like the car this year, and it suits him really well. And I think
Yep.
he's really fully hitting his stride this year. Whereas there was some questions about that last year. I think there's no question he's really on the ball this year, and I'm really glad to see that.
Yeah, yeah, he's qualifying well,
Yeah.
which he's qualifying well, but he's also delivering in the race. I think he's going from success to success.
Yes.
His confidence is building,
It's great to
and
see.
I'll tell you another thing that is often not true in Formula One teams is that Verstappen and Perez are truly friends off track, and they're
Yes.
very much alike. They get along, and
Yes.
that's huge for
That
a
is
team.
huge.
I think Red Bull has a lot of mojo right now as far
Yeah.
as with Christian Horner and everybody on that. They've got just such a brilliant team.
Yeah.
and they have a good attitude right now. Even
Yeah.
though they're struggling, obviously,
Yeah.
a
I,
little
I
bit
think
here.
about that note, though, I think Perez, when he got signed on, he was the number two. He knew
Yeah,
that, and he was fine with that. Most drivers, when they get signed on to a team, they're never like this was the case with Mercedes. Lewis
yeah,
and Valtteri were both they were considered equals. Neither of them were considered the number one, even though it was obvious that Lewis was the number one driver, and he was treated
yeah.
like that. And Bottas was frequently had to sacrifice due to team orders his own race in order to let Lewis do his thing.
Yeah, I think in that case, in my opinion, I think Valtteri was more magnanimous than Lewis. Lewis would have never
Yeah.
been driver number two.
Oh yeah.
Valtteri, I'm sure, didn't like it, but he
He
understood.
dealt with it. He
He was
sucked it
part of
up
a
and dealt
team.
with it.
Yeah, he did, and he's
Yeah.
more mature. And
Yeah.
in fact, and frankly, Max is a very mature guy for his age. He's like a
He is
20
now. As
something.
of a few years ago, he was not, but he's matured a
Yeah,
whole lot
well,
over the
yeah,
last
what
2-3
yeah,
seasons.
17, 18, 19, who is, but
Yeah, well,
at
sure,
this
true.
point now he's turned into a 40-year-old
Yeah.
man in the car, which is
Yeah.
great.
That's great. Yeah.
But
Because he's a 40-year-old
but
man maturity wise, and yet he's
yeah, yeah,
23 with
yeah,
reflexes.
exactly.
So
Which is
yeah,
you know, I I just think he's a great driver,
he is.
and we've got, hopefully, touch wood, knock on wood, we've got years to watch him continue to progress.
Hopefully, yeah. But yeah, just to briefly wrap up about Perez and Max and their dynamic. Perez is perfectly happy being a number two, and at no point has he been upset that he's had to do stuff to make Max's race better. He's been happy to do it every time, and I think that is a pretty integral part of why their dynamic works so well. Is because Perez, he knows he's the number two, and he's perfectly happy with it.
Well, that is true, and it will be interesting to see if Max can handle it. If he struggles and Perez continues to do so well,
True.
and
So
if you're
far, it's been dumb luck.
2/3 of the way through the season and there's no way,
Yeah.
and Perez has a good lead in the points, just saying, like in the drivers'
Yeah.
championship.
True.
I'm sure Max would return the favor like Perez did for him last year,
Oh
but
yeah, yeah. But
but
we may be eating
that
our
I
words
think
in six
Max is
months' time.
capable. I think he's capable of doing that, but that'll be
Yeah,
interesting to see. That
yeah.
would be tough for poor Max. But
But yeah, we
speaking
haven't
of poor
directly
Max,
mentioned it yet, but Max retired again due to a
yes.
power unit issue, which is what they both retired to in the first race. And I
Did
thought
they
they
say
were
power unit? Because I know there was fluid coming out which caused a fire. So I
That's
don't
true. I
think it
don't know
was.
what the issue was, in fairness.
Yeah, I know that the commentators mentioned before the start of the race that they were looking in the pits and they were feverishly working away
Yeah.
on some of the hydraulic. They're guessing hydraulic lines in the back
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
car, and Christian Horner was kind of blocking the view. He didn't want people seeing it.
Right.
And due to the fact that there was a fire when they pulled over, I don't think it was radiator fluid, so it wasn't coolant. It was probably hydraulic fluid.
Yeah. Potentially,
So
yeah.
yeah, and it could have been perhaps, something wasn't, one line that wasn't tightened all the way, or wasn't tightened properly. They didn't have
Yeah.
time to torque it, and it comes loose through vibration during the race. Regardless, it's a shame because Max, once again, Red Bull is missing a car with 0 points, and Max walks away with nothing. And this is 2 out of 3 races now
Yeah.
that this has happened. So it so far it's feast or famine for him.
Yeah.
He either wins or he DNFs.
Yeah. Literally DNF won the race, DNF. So
Yeah,
it's like-
yeah, and that's and he's the reigning world champion. This is unacceptable.
No, it is. It is.
This
So
cannot continue.
I thought Red Bull had fixed their problems, but apparently there's still some more gremlins in the works. Um
Somewhere,
somewhere. Hopefully
yeah,
they can
there's
fix that
something
because
going on.
yeah, I mean we've talked before where I am of the impression that you're basically allowed 2 DNFs in a season, and that's fine. You can still win the championship. So it sucks that Max got both of them in the first 3 races.
Yeah,
So
his work is cut out for him for
absolutely,
the
it
rest
just
of the
means that
season.
he can't afford another DNF for something.
Especially with Mercedes, in
Oh, dude,
theory,
yeah,
getting faster and faster each
yeah,
subsequent race. So
yeah,
that's going to be a
Yeah, this
problem.
is
It's now is when Red Bull needs to capitalize on Mercedes, and
yeah,
but it also shows that this is a new season. These cars are
yeah,
new, and the cruel hand of fate is dealing blows fairly indiscriminately at this
yeah.
point.
Yeah.
So
So that it played into Mercedes' hands beautifully. They're getting much needed points very early when they're struggling badly. Like they made out like bandits in the first 3 races here. And
yeah,
um so they seem to be getting better. Their qualifying pace is still like 8 tenths off, which is really bad, but their race
yeah,
pace is getting steadily better. To the point where
right,
they were only, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 seconds behind Perez by the end, and,
yeah,
like, that's way better than they were in the previous 2 races, so
yeah. And the another event that we should probably talk about that happened after Verstappen's retirement was Stroll was cited for weaving
yeah, yep.
down the straights, and he did, and he
Yeah,
received a 5.
5-second penalty.
Who was behind him? It was Valtteri, wasn't it? That was behind him,
Yeah, Valtteri was trying to
trying to
pass.
pass him, and he received a 5-second penalty that was, I'm sure, assessed at the end of the race. It wasn't a stop and go or anything, and
Yeah,
typically he could receive another point or two penalty points on his super license. So we'll have to check the news after we finish
yeah,
speaking, and then see where that. But that's something for people to keep an eye on, because, and real quick, you're allowed 12. If you get 12 points against your super license, you are banned for the next race, and then
yeah.
the points go away. You go back to 0. But it's a
Is it just
rolling
one
12.
race?
Yes, just one race,
Okay.
and it's a rolling 12-month window. In other words, if he's got 9 points now, and the first one of those came at a race this time, like on the round 3 of last year, then by round 4, that point will age off. So it's a rolling 12-month window when it comes to points. So, and I don't know, what I haven't looked at, when he incurred the points against his super license,
Yeah,
but if came into the weekend with 5 and leaves with 9, and that continues, it won't be long before he has to sit out a race.
yeah, true.
So,
So, yeah,
yeah,
the
which
reason
is
why weaving is a problem is because one of the announcers, I forget, it might have been Martin Brundle, who's usually really good about these things, but it might have been Crofty, I don't remember. But one of them said they put it very well that basically you can't race against somebody who weaves. Basically, what he did is on the straight when Bottas was trying to pass him, he moves to the right and blocks Bottas. So Bottas
yep,
moves to the left. So Lance moves to the left again. And then Bottas is like, okay, I'll pass on the right. And then Lance moves to the right again. And
and
it's
you
just
can't do
like,
that.
you can't do that because it becomes dangerous. If somebody's passing you down a straight where they have DRS potentially, which Bottas did, I believe, and they have the slipstream and everything, they're speed is much higher than yours. And if you're weaving all over the
Exactly.
place, it's just super dangerous and you can't
Well,
race
it's
against
it's
someone
a
like that.
slower. Well, the other thing, it's the equivalent of what used to be a black and white flag, meaning you're slow, move over. There's a
Right.
fast car behind you,
Right.
and they're not. I don't think they're doing that any. I'm not sure if they are or not, but the point is, he at that point it's bad sportsmanship. There's a
Yeah.
fast car behind you, and you're just weaving all over the track, being dangerous, and potentially causing an accident, which at speed is always dangerous,
Yeah.
and destroying somebody else's race and their
Yeah.
championship, simply because you won't let someone past you
Yep.
when you're a slower car.
And
So that's a maturity issue. Lance
yeah,
Stroll
absolutely.
has to grow up. It's another example that he's an immature driver right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I
yeah,
had
so
Lance Stroll is a bit of a weird case because initially it was like, okay, you're only here because of your dad. But then in like I think 2020 in particular, he put in a really good season. And
yeah,
like he was consistent, he was reliable, he didn't do stupid things. And then last year and especially this year, he's just like mistake after mistake after mistake and it's
well, and
dumb
even last year,
mistakes.
to be honest, he had some great races last year.
True,
He
true. He's
he did.
capable.
He's very capable. He put in some good laps last year, some good races, but
Yeah.
then he has these moments of, frankly, stupidity that
Yeah.
he needs to stop. He needs to
Yep.
stop doing that, and
Yeah.
he can do that. He'll eventually have to do it because you don't want a bad reputation. You don't want other drivers being afraid to go around you
Yeah.
because, and they're not going to do it. And if he keeps it up, he will cause a crash.
Yeah.
And then that's going to have serious repercussions for him down the road.
Yeah. Like weaving is something that you should never, ever, ever get penalized for because it should be ingrained in you to never, ever do. And
Yeah,
yet he's here on his fifth season, maybe sixth, and he's weaving. And
something
it's
like
just
that.
like,
Yeah.
you should know better.
Yeah, yeah, there's no excuse for it. I mean,
Yeah.
frankly, sometimes even the most competitive, most mature drivers do really dumb things. I'm
True.
thinking of Michael Schumacher intentionally
Yeah.
putting his car in the wall at Monaco
Yeah.
and whatever, to block in qualifying to make sure that he had pole for the race.
Yeah.
He should never have done that.
Nope.
It was a very bad look for somebody that,
And just so
had
anyone
had
listening
his skill.
knows, Michael Schumacher is Uncle Dan's by far and away favorite driver. So he's
I loved
criticizing him.
I very much enjoyed seeing him
Yeah.
when he was with Ferrari, 7-time world champion.
Yeah.
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 Quickly, the thing I liked about him the most is the guy was a robot. He could go race after race after race and literally never put a wheel wrong.
Yeah. True.
And that's just something that when you see that time and time and time and time again, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And we'll get into more detail on him in the future, what he did for Ferrari, the
Yeah.
bad shape they were in when he got there and how he built the team. That's a whole other story.
Yeah.
Anyway, the other thing I noticed in Q3 before we, because we're almost out of time here, but is Hamilton, and this is something I just hate seeing from him, but he complained to the team over the radio,
Yeah.
which he has a bad habit of doing. He
Yeah.
said something to the effect of, "Wow, you guys really put me in a difficult position." And true or not, there's Mercedes is under a lot of pressure, and Hamilton is the first guy on the grid that will throw his team under the bus when he gets frustrated, or if they do something that he feels was that didn't work out in his favor. And I just think Mercedes. It's the difference between the Mercedes pit and the Red Bull pit. This is what we alluded
Well,
to
and the
earlier.
Ferrari. Ferrari doesn't do
And,
that
and
either.
yeah, and Ferrari, I don't know as much about the current, like the attitude in the current Ferrari garage, um, but yeah, I'm sure that's true there because Mercedes it's just here's what it does. When you have a key person in your organization that does nothing but complain, then other people feel they can complain. It's becomes part of the culture, and it's a negative culture that does not produce results. This is something that both Lewis and Toto, if they want to get past this part of this unfortunate place they're in Formula One right now, they're going to have to put their egos aside and they're going to have to do everything they can to build up everybody on the team and quit complaining and just do the work and get it done and get better. And that's what Mercedes does and other teams, but it's something Hamilton has always done. And it's something that,
Yeah.
frankly, in my opinion, detracts from his achievements.
Yeah, true. I tend to agree. I will also be quick to point out though that he's not the only person that does that. I know last year in particular, Sonoda with for AlphaTauri, he did
Mhm.
that a lot, and like anytime something went wrong, he was yelling at his team, and it's just like that's just
But he's like what, 12 years old,
yeah, he
something.
has he has more of an excuse in fairness, but just to point out that Lewis
Yeah.
isn't the only one that does that. I mean, there's eh,
Let's say that he's the only one at his level of success that just continually does
yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
and the other thing is with some of these younger drivers coming in, they're going to take cues from especially
Also
a
true.
7-time world champion like Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy's amazing. He has an amazing career, but the personality needs to start backing up the achievements.
Yeah.
Just
No, that's
I'll
fair.
leave it at that for now.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's entirely fair.
Okay.
So moving on to the race results. So
Yes.
Leclerc ended up winning. He led every single lap. It was not even close. He was completely dominant throughout the entire race.
It was a
Um,
Ferrari weekend. It,
yeah,
it it went from pole to fastest lap
yeah,
to the race win, and like you said, and he led every lap as far as I know. He might have missed one or two getting tires. I don't know,
probably when he
but
was in the
you know,
pits. But
but
yeah,
as far as once everything was sorted out with tire changes, he was clearly in front.
yeah,
I
and he
don't
ended
think
up
he came under
finishing 20
serious
seconds
pressure.
ahead.
Yeah, yeah, there was a huge margin there.
Like it's crazy.
So, yeah, which we haven't seen in a while. It's been a
No,
while since we saw somebody
yeah.
that far ahead.
But then after him was Perez getting second,
Yep.
which was great. I was really happy to see that the other Red Bull didn't have a technical issue as well. So Red Bull is
Yes.
still able to get a good 18 points there, which they really, really need. And
Yeah.
it's another,
Perez had a solid car all weekend. It looked like.
yeah, and it's another second place and another podium for Perez, which is always great to see.
But then there's an interesting number three who was on the
Yes.
podium.
Yeah, George Russell. And
It was
he
not
got
Lewis Hamilton.
second place back in Spa last year when it was rained out and they didn't even really race.
No.
And so in an actual proper race, he gets third, which is his first podium in an actual proper race. And that's
And
pretty cool.
finishes in front of his teammate.
Yes. Yeah. Hamilton didn't seem like he caught up to him a bit, but he was never close enough to pass him. And maybe that was team orders. Maybe they're just like, look, he's ahead, let him win or let him finish ahead. I don't know.
I don't
I
know.
didn't hear any radio messages about that, but
Yeah, I didn't either. I don't know that it was, but
yeah.
I don't think there's the same level of camaraderie between Russell and Lewis as there is between Perez and
Well, I
Verstappen.
haven't seen anything to that yet. I think time will tell. I think they're both in a position right now where they're not at all where they thought they would be or hoped that they would be.
Yeah, it's a
And
tough year.
there's more we're in this together kind of attitude because of their struggles. But I don't know.
I saw a little chink in the armor in Q3 in qualifying where um, twice that they showed Russell came on the radio and said, "Look, Hamilton is going too slow. Tell him to speed up. Tell him to speed up." It was
True.
almost like
Yeah.
Hamilton was impeding him because he didn't want him doing better than he was.
Oh
In
no,
other
yeah.
words,
Russell's
and
very
I
competitive.
didn't think
Yeah.
that was cool. I didn't for teammates. I don't think that Russell should have had to say he maybe one time like, hey, tell Lewis to speed up or move over. I'm faster than him right now,
Yeah.
and that didn't happen, and
Yeah,
he had
but
to repeat it a second time.
we've seen that from teammates a lot. Maybe not in qualifying, but certainly throughout the race.
Yeah, yeah, and usually they'll do it. They'll have the other guy move over. In this
Yeah.
case, I don't think the team they just kind of didn't acknowledge it. So,
Yeah. No, that yeah.
but it was just again my spidey senses just kind of went okay. I'm not going to make too much of it, but it could be a little chink in the armor
Could
showing
be.
itself.
Yeah.
And
We'll
we'll
have to
see.
keep an eye on that.
Something to watch going forward.
Yep. So then after Russell was Hamilton in fourth, which that's just incredibly good points for Mercedes when they're still
Yes, it
struggling.
is. Yep.
But then behind them was McLaren, and they finished outside of the points in the both previous races, I believe.
Yeah,
Maybe barely
I
in the
think so.
points in one of them, but like, yeah, they got 18 points together. Lando Norris in fifth and Daniel Ricciardo in sixth, and that was an absolutely good recovery from them because they were way off the pace in the first two races.
Yeah. Yeah, they Ricardo had a clean race, which is something he desperately needed.
Yeah,
And Norris is Norris. I think he pushed that car as far as it could go.
yeah,
They at one point in the race, they were truly giving Mercedes a run for their money.
yeah,
Even though they both have Mercedes power plants, I think they have a better chassis.
yeah,
It just didn't they couldn't do any better than fifth and sixth this time. But it
yeah.
was an
The
excellent result for them. Great kudos to McLaren. It's great to see them
Yeah, the difference
where
is
where,
though
where they ought to be.
they were around 20 seconds behind. Norris finished in 20 seconds or so roughly behind Hamilton, which so that shows that they are solidly behind Mercedes, but at least they're ahead of everyone else. So,
So is it safe to say at this point that that's Mercedes and McLaren are competing for third place.
I mean, it depends. If Red Bull is able to sort out their gremlins and have no reliability issues moving forward, then I think yes, definitely. I think if Red Bull has if Red Bull has reliability issues throughout the entire rest of the season, then they're going to be lucky if they get fourth. Like they can't
Yeah.
afford to keep doing this.
Well, I'll
Um,
tell you another thing. We haven't seen the end of the Alpines, and we haven't seen the end of um, like Ocon, those guys.
yeah,
So Williams, but
yeah, yeah. So I mean, we'll see. I think definitely right now Mercedes is still solidly behind Red Bull.
yeah,
But it also seems like Red Bull is solidly behind Ferrari. I mean, it's kind of hard to tell. Obviously, we're still very early in the season, and especially very, very early in this era of F1 with the brand new style of cars. So
yeah.
anything can happen by the end of the season. But
Well, and we're also getting into the point of the season where reliability could become an issue.
yeah, definitely
Bottas, I think, has already had to take a new power plant. One thing to keep an eye on is I believe that Ferrari built their own transmission this
Oh,
year, and
interesting.
that is, I believe it was them. Somebody can correct us in the comments if I'm wrong on that, but I believe it's Ferrari,
Okay,
and they have had some issues with that. So, meaning that high performance stuff breaks on a routine basis, but Formula One has been very good about having things not break.
yeah,
But when you get into the fourth and fifth races, if there is a weakness in the Ferrari platform, then that can change things and put Red Bull squarely back on top. Is assuming
true.
that they keep going at a good pace and sort their problems
True. Yeah.
out. Yeah.
One of the other F1 content creators that I really like is Chain Bear. He makes great
Hmm.
animated videos that describe all kinds of stuff. But in one of his more recent videos, he had like a graph showing how the development goes in each era, and there's just this massive spike right at the beginning,
Hmm.
and then it levels off while steadily still increasing, but the increase is much more slight. And that
Yeah.
entire giant jump in performance is the first season of the era. So we're gonna
Yes.
see. I don't think the relative pace right now is at all indicative of where we're gonna end up at the end of the season. So it just depends who's able to outdevelop who. And I think Ferrari will. My hunch is Ferrari will continue to have the edge because they already have the edge and they don't have any glaring issues besides maybe the porpoising that they are just trying to solve. Whereas Red Bull has
And
reliability
the
issues,
potential reliability issue. I
potential
think.
reliability issues. Fair.
Yeah, I
Um,
still favor Red Bull for the season. I think it's going to be a Red Bull season when it's all said and done.
yeah, maybe.
Um, the other thing that was speculated a lot in the Formula One world this week was that one of the big issues with the Mercedes is the floor, and they're not going to have a
True.
completely redesigned floor
True.
until they get to Silverstone, which is the 10th round, almost halfway through the season.
True.
If that is true,
Yeah.
then now the results this week were good, but of course they wouldn't have been in the position they were if Max's car had stayed on the
No, they
had
would have been fourth and
stayed together.
fifth, which is still
No,
really good. But
they would have been yeah they would have been fourth and fifth, which is it's good, but
yeah,
so but anyway, yeah, that's so if that's true, if it's not till halfway through the season, it shows that they've got a serious problem. And frankly, once they even get the new floor, who knows if that's going to fix the problems or not.
yeah. I mean, who knows? Like
So,
that's the problem. Is like Mercedes has very, very fundamental problems with their car, whereas neither Red Bull nor Ferrari does. Red Bull appears to have
yeah,
some reliability things, but given that Perez had no problems whatsoever, it might have just been unique to this weekend and just a bad coincidence.
yeah.
But
And another thing that was trending in Formula One news this week was the number of people, including an aerodynamicist, that left Mercedes in the last year and
oh,
went to other
interesting.
teams. Yeah, in fact, their aerodynamicist went to Alfa Romeo. Hmm.
Oh, and they're doing
Interest.
better. Interesting how that
Yes.
turns out.
So there was, I think, there were a large number of defections over the last year or two.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I don't
You
know
know,
what was behind that.
that does happen eventually. Either they're trying to get paid too much, or they just get tired of winning all the time, and engineers
Or
are
there's
as
something about the team, like, why do
or
people change
maybe
why do
that.
people change jobs? Like, if you're a, computer programmer,
Yeah.
you might change jobs. If you're working
This is
at
a
a
bad
place,
working
even if you're
environment.
making good money, but you're
Yeah.
miserable, you're
Yeah.
gonna change jobs.
Well,
So,
there's that, or
but
maybe it was just like engineers are as competitive as everyone else, and like maybe they just wanted, much like Michael Schumacher joining Ferrari when Ferrari was bad. He liked the idea of going to a new team and
yeah,
rebuilding them. And
yeah.
maybe some of these engineers are like, you know what? I'll go to Alpha and see what I can do there and see if we can turn around the team.
Yeah,
And
I think
I'm
it's probably
speculating, but
it's probably, yeah, it's total speculation
yeah,
on our part, but I think it's probably a combination of all the above.
yeah,
But my guess is the culture at Mercedes does not help things. Does not help employee retention, let's
yeah,
say.
it's
But
possible.
perhaps,
It's
perhaps
possible. I don't
it's
know
a
enough about the culture there, but
yeah.
it's possible. I know that in previous years, Toto Wolff has said that they have a no blame policy where like they don't say it's anyone's fault or anything. And I'm like, on
That's
paper
good.
that sounds good, but I don't know. Like sometimes you need to blame, not in a sense of like this is your fault and you should feel bad, but in a sense of this team is failing and we need to support them more. And if you don't issue blame, I don't know. It was just kind of a confusing sort of thing because I'm like, how exactly practically does that work out? And it could either be really beneficial or it could be really detrimental. I guess I don't know,
Yeah.
but
And I think the last thing to note is that Stroll finished out of the points. He
yeah,
finished the race in like 12th or something, which
I
due
had yeah
to,
12th.
I think it was Albon came in for a tire change and
Yeah,
then was able to take the 10th position.
well, true,
And,
but
and
Stroll was like including his penalty, he was 7 seconds behind Joe,
yeah, yeah,
so he
he
would
would
have
have
finished
finished
12th
in,
anyway.
or worse, but yeah. Yeah, I don't know we have to check the final after the penalty, but
I've got
I
the times right
believe,
here. Joe was 7 seconds ahead of him, so he
okay.
would have finished
Yeah.
behind Joe anyway.
So what
But
was his official ending number?
he was 12th and was
And
88.
that's after the penalty?
Correct. He was 88 and a half seconds behind the leader.
Hmm.
So,
Okay. I thought he was 10th, and then I thought he went to 12th, and then he would have had the 3 grid penalty. I thought he
yeah,
was,
that
or
was
the 5 second penalty, I
it
said.
was looking that way towards the end, but I think his pace just fell off towards the
Oh,
end or
you know what?
something. I'm
The
not sure.
5 second penalty probably meant nothing at that level. The cars are so far apart when you get farther down the grid,
Yeah.
5 seconds doesn't necessarily change a position.
Yeah, there was a time where he was leading a train of cars where he would have fallen like 5 places from it.
Yeah, yeah,
But
and that
um
wasn't true. I don't know
by
that
the
that was
end
true
that
at the
wasn't the case. So,
Okay.
all right. So,
Those are my notes on the race itself.
yeah, so I also wanted to talk very briefly about Alfa Romeo and Haas because particularly Haas, Alfa recovered pretty well, but they were showing very badly in practice and qualifying. But they ended up finishing Bottas finished 8th and Joe
Hmm.
finished 11th, which is pretty good. No
Yep.
complaints there. But then you look at Haas and you have Magnussen finishing in the top 10 in both previous races and going into Q3 in both previous races. And
Hmm.
neither of them got into Q3 and Magnussen was out in Q1. And now granted, Magnussen said that he was ill, had some like nausea or something throughout the weekend. So that may
Yeah.
have played into it. That may have been all that it was. But you've got Schumacher in 13th and Magnussen right behind him in 14th. And that just seems uncharacteristic of
Yeah, I'm not sure
Magnussen.
what happened to Mick because at one point he passed Hamilton. He was faster than Hamilton earlier in the race.
Yeah, I think that was due to Pitt's
Who knows?
strategy or something.
I
Like
don't
he
know.
hadn't
I
pit
mean,
yet,
no,
but
he
Hamilton did. I don't
passed him on the
remember.
track. He actually passed him on the track. It wasn't in the pits.
I don't know that that Mick was ever
He did.
ever
He
that.
did. I saw. Yeah,
Okay,
he did.
okay,
If you go back and watch it, he passed him on the
okay.
track. But I could have been tires. It could have been he was on new and Lewis. He
Yeah,
went long on his first tire. I don't remember exactly when it was, but I thought, oh, that's interesting.
yeah,
So, but it didn't end up that way. Yeah, they
yeah.
faded. So
So I don't know what's up with them. Hopefully they can bounce back. Hopefully this was a one-off. Hopefully it was just this kind of a track that didn't suit them very well. But I was really glad to see, especially after their miserable previous 2 seasons, I
Yep.
was hoping that they would bounce back really well, which it looked like they did, but then now they're bad again. So they're clearly not the slowest on the track, which is really
Hmm.
good, which is really,
Yep.
really good. But I was hoping that they would be able to keep their form over the last two races. So we'll have to see how that goes. But then I have in my notes here, is McLaren back? Now we've touched on this throughout the episode here, but like I think McLaren might be back. They had two horrible races and they finished fifth and sixth. Do you think that this form will keep up?
It's hard to say. I would like to see them vying with, for the third place on the grid, to be honest, or even better sometimes, depending. My concern for McLaren, and this is a separate topic, we don't have time to go into it now.
Yeah,
This is
yeah.
going to be too long. But my concern is Daniel Ricciardo. I think I'm not sure his heart is in it or his mind's in it. He is a huge wild card. You just don't know what he's going to do when he gets behind the wheel. Now,
That's
he
true.
played it safe. He played it safe, did well this week, but you don't know what he's going to do next week.
Yeah.
And so we have to wait and see if he's back in it. He had an uncharacteristically fairly safe drive. He didn't try a lot of crazy moves on the track. He was
I think it's
really
because he was at home and he didn't want to do something dumb and crash.
well, exactly, because I don't think he's never completed a race at his home track.
Yeah.
And I think that was a
No,
goal
he
that the
has.
team.
He's finished. I think he finished fourth at least once. So
When was
maybe I
at
could be
at
misremembering.
Australia?
I could be
Maybe,
misremembering. I know
but
he DNF'd
he
half the
has a
time.
bad history at that track.
Yeah,
Let's just put it
he's
that
been
way.
there 8 times and he's DNF'd. Well, now 9 times,
Okay,
and
yeah,
he
I think
DNF'd
he
4
might
of
have
them.
finished fourth, like in his first year or
Yeah,
something. But then it hasn't been kind to him since. So I think one of the objectives for McLaren at Melbourne was to finish the race, and
and they
he
did.
did that.
Yeah,
So that's a good thing.
yeah,
But when he lets loose going forward and he's actually racing for position, well, we have to see if he's got the skills to pull it off.
yeah,
Because he can get squirrely, you
yeah.
know. So yeah, we'll
So
see.
we'll see.
But I think they have a good package for. I like McLaren. I think they're farther ahead in development than
Yeah,
Haas is at this point.
they were one of like
Um,
it was
eh,
them and Red Bull that didn't have any porpoising at all in practice.
yeah, I think
Um,
Alpine is a team that I also think is with Alonso. I think is going to do potentially some really good things. I
yeah, we'll
kind of
see.
like Alpine. I like them, but McLaren is a more mature team. They've been around. They have been around forever.
Yeah,
I think that they ought to be vying for third. They ought to
yeah,
be competing with Mercedes for third every week,
yeah,
and
yeah.
they should be dicing back. I would have liked to have seen him pass the Mercedes today, and I expected to see it. Didn't see it. It was a little disappointing, but
Yeah.
yeah. Hmm.
So, yeah, we'll see how that goes. Let's talk a little bit. I know we've gone on for quite a while, but let's talk a little bit about Carlos Sainz.
Okay.
What's up with him? Because it seemed like last year at Ferrari, he was brilliant. He was super consistent. He was taking the fight to Leclerc. He beat Leclerc, I think, throughout the season, and he finished ahead in the championship. Not by much, but
Initially, he was the number one driver at Ferrari.
yeah,
It was expected that he was going to be number
yeah,
one. Like for example, that Leclerc would be Rubens Barrichello to Sainz's Michael Schumacher,
yeah.
and that is definitely been reversed.
Yeah, I wonder what's going on with him because well, in Bahrain he finished second, and then in the post race interviews he was talking about how it was a frustrating weekend for him, and I'm like,
Mhm.
why you finished second? Well, it's because he was consistently behind Leclerc throughout the entire
Yeah,
weekend, and that stayed
yeah.
the case in Saudi Arabia, and then this weekend was a mess, but like I get the impression that he's putting a whole lot of pressure on himself, thinking that he needs to outperform Leclerc, which obviously any driver's number one competitor is their teammate. But
I think there's a possibility that Leclerc is a more gifted driver,
he
and
is. I
Sainz
think he
simply
is.
didn't. Well, if that's the case, then results like now today. is not indicative of what Sainz is capable of. His car must have had some
Oh,
sort of a problem.
absolutely. Yeah.
But in general, I think, and he's going to win races. I'm sure he'll win a race this year at some point.
Yeah.
Sainz will, but overall, I think Leclerc is giving him a run for his money. Now, Leclerc is kind of he's in a really interesting honeymoon period where everything is going his way right
Yeah.
now. And will that last? Time will
Yeah.
tell.
True.
But if it does, and that's the test of a true driver, because the more you win, the more you're expected to win. And so
True.
instead of being, hey, we're Ferrari, we've been struggling for years and now we're on top and I'm the guy on the podium, it's going to be like, okay, hey, we got to keep going. We could win the constructors championship. We can win, you're leading in the drivers championship. We got to keep this going. That brings in a different set of psychology to the driver himself. It's
True.
instead of thinking about winning races and how to attack each corner, in the back of his mind, he knows there's added pressure.
Yeah.
So how he deals with that, if he can compartmentalize that, which I'm sure he can to a large degree, but those are the things that go through my mind that I need that will wait and see how different people do handle that. For example, my opinion, I think there's a question as to how well Daniel Ricciardo can
Yeah.
handle that type of pressure.
But
He
yeah,
left
as
Red Bull. Why did he leave Red Bull? It didn't
yeah,
make sense. So,
I think
but
that's a topic for another time because we could talk
yeah,
about
yeah,
that a
it
lot.
is, it
But
is.
I think
But I'm just making a quick comparison.
true.
I think I don't. Well, I think right now there's no reason to believe that Leclerc is not extremely strong and he's going to stay there.
Yeah.
If you put a good car under him, I think he has the ability to develop into a continue to develop into a very exciting
Yeah.
winning driver.
Definitely. So I see signs as looking at last year going, I did better than Leclerc last year throughout the year. I should be
Yep.
doing better than him now, and putting a lot
Yes.
of pressure on himself and getting into his own head and consequently getting in his own way. And he's making unforced errors, which is not typical of him. He's maybe the most consistent driver on the entire field. The
Yeah.
guy, like, that may be another video, is the most consistent drivers in the field, and I think he's top three for sure without question. He might be number one, and so to see this kind of thing happen this weekend, very, very, very uncharacteristic of him. And
You're saying that Sainz is the top driver as a
as
or
in
just
forms
this
of
last weekend,
consistency,
even more than Verstappen, even more
uh,
than Hamilton.
that's a discussion for another time. I think he's up there with them. I think he's up there with them.
I
Um,
don't. Yeah, we'll see. I don't see it that way, but I'm willing to be proven wrong on that.
yeah, well, that's a topic for another time. But
Yeah. I
regardless,
mean, these
he's
guys. Yeah.
one of the most consistent people in the field, and
Hmm.
so to see this happen is very uncharacteristic of him. And I think it's because he's just psyching himself out. And I would love to see him take a page out of Perez's book, not in resigning himself to the number two driver necessarily, but in the sense of, I just have a job to do. Let me just chill out and do the best I can and not sit
Yes.
there and freak out about having to beat his teammate.
Yeah. Yeah. He's got to. You have to be able to handle failure in this
Yeah.
business. You got to put it behind you and forget about it. It's like
Yes.
a crash.
Yeah.
If you have a bad crash, you need to say,
Yep.
okay, you need to forget about
Once you're out of the hospital from your
it.
precautionary checks, you forget it happened.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'm a lifelong motorcyclist. You know
Yeah. Yeah.
that. But and there's plenty of times where you see other guys in accidents, or guys in accidents, or you have a close call yourself. And
Hmm.
the bottom line is, you have two choices. You either just go, okay, nothing happened, I'm good to go, or you quit riding.
Yeah.
And if you want to keep riding, you have to put it behind you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just the way it is, and that's what it takes. And with drivers, it takes that ability to shake off not only crashes, but you have to shake off poor results
Yeah.
for a while. And what he has to do is not internalize it, like you said, not take it personally, not think it reflects on his character. And honestly, that's a lesson we all have to learn in life. There are times where all of us as human beings go through a series of failures, and we start to question our own character, our own
Yeah.
abilities, and we think, is this who I am? Am I this guy now? And honestly, one of the keys to becoming a successful human being is to have faith in who you are, even if you go through a string of failures, and realize that often we all learn more from mistakes than we learn from our successes. So hopefully Sainz will do that, and he'll come out on top and give Leclerc a run for his money and everybody else
Yeah.
at that point in time.
Very, very well said. Last thing
Thank you.
about him, though, has this weekend, do you think this weekend has secured him as the number two at Ferrari? Or do you think he still has a shot of being seen as an equal or clawing back a number one type of position?
Well, there's 21 races this season. This is number
Something
3.
like, yeah,
Yeah. So I don't. You're saying this is Sainz? Is he squarely in number 2 right now? He is number 2,
yeah,
and that's just a fact of life. If he wants to not be number 2, he needs to start winning races.
true,
Bottom line,
true.
and the thing about Ferrari, there is something about Ferrari as a team that I can tell you from watching them for decades. They support whoever's winning, and the second you're not that guy, you are number 2, and they don't have
That
any
is
problems
very
hurting
true.
it. If they don't have any problems hurting anybody's feelings. Let's put it this way: Ferrari fired Michael Schumacher. Need I say more? And it probably had to happen. Look
I
at the
forgot about
guys that
that.
are current. Look at the guys that have been through Ferrari over the
Yeah,
decades. All the great drivers wind up wearing red. It's some Kimi Raikkonen, Fernando Alonso,
yeah.
Rubens Barrichello. These guys that were
Vettel, yeah.
amazing. Yeah. Sebastian Vettel, perfect, 4-time world champ. Is he there now? Nope. He's
Nope.
with Aston Martin.
Yeah,
So
F1 as a whole is a very much a not what have you done, but it's what have you done for me lately. And
yeah,
Ferrari is the poster child of that.
yeah. They're like Spock from Star Trek.
Yeah,
They just look at numbers. They have
yeah,
no emotional attachment really when it comes to who's number 1 and number 2.
yeah,
So if Sainz starts performing and he does better than Leclerc, then they'll champion him as his number 1 until he's
yeah,
not doing it, and they'll forget that they'll just put him in number 2.
yeah.
So they're really tough that way. But
Yep.
it's a tough game.
All right. So last thing, let's be really quick here. Do you think
Okay.
that this weekend has put Ferrari now firmly as the team to beat this year for the championship?
Um, so far, yes. But
Yeah,
again, I'm going to hedge my bets because it's so early in the season. But
yeah,
I think Red Bull will sort out their problems, and let's see what happens next week.
yeah,
If Red Bull wins at next race, round 4, then it's 2 weeks, I guess. It's going to be like, okay, now
yeah,
what? now we have a fight going
yeah.
on.
Fair point. Yeah,
We
my wild prediction, if you remember at the beginning of last year, was that Max would win the title and that Mercedes would win the constructors, which is what happened. That was my
Yeah.
wild prediction. I didn't
Mhm.
expect it to
Mhm.
happen, but that was my wild prediction. My wild prediction at the beginning of this year, before the first race, was that Ferrari would win the constructors and Leclerc would win the title. So
And
I
I
I
still think Max will win. He'll have 2 in a row, and Red Bull will win constructors this year.
I'm not
I
at
can
all
say
going to
that.
be surprised if that happens, but at the
Yeah,
current
yeah,
point in time, it seems like Ferrari has a little bit too much in hand over Red Bull, and Red Bull is
yeah,
perfectly capable of clawing that back. But we'll have to wait and
yeah.
see how that
And
goes.
the predictions are worth exactly what they cost you. So
Absolutely,
at this point, they're pretty
absolutely,
meaningless, but it's always fun to speculate.
yeah,
So well, we'll see what other people say. I'm sure we'll get other comments
yeah,
of
yeah,
where people think it's going to finish. If you
yeah,
guys have a different opinion, put it in the comments. We'll see.
absolutely.
We can talk about it later.
All right. So, any more comments about the race before we go ahead and wrap
Nope,
this one up?
nope. I think we can go to our wrap up.
All right. I think we've gone on for quite too long, almost an hour and a half. Pretty crazy.
Yep.
But all right, so I think that'll do it for now. We do have another segment that we want to be a regular occurrence, which is giving out our most coveted and highly sought after awards for. There's two of them: the Bonehead of the Week, which is
The Bonehead of the Week and the Pits of Despair Award.
yeah, the Pits of Despair. Yeah, so the Bonehead of the Week is going to the driver who did the most to shoot themselves in the foot all and just basically just be I don't know, just be a dummy throughout the whole weekend.
A
Um,
bad human. Bad human.
yes. And then the pits of despair is not always self-inflicted, whereas the bonehead is typically more towards self-inflicted stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Pits
But
of despair. We should explain a little bit.
go for it.
It's the team that leaves the garage, bashing themselves in the head with a torque wrench, going, "Why us? Why us?" They're sad, they're crying.
Yeah.
It could be for self-inflicted wounds, or it could be for bad mechanical luck, or it could be for rain when they weren't expecting. It could be for anything, but
Yeah.
it's a team that just could not get a break.
Yep. So we will go over both of those as well as taking a quick look at Imola, which is the next track in, I believe, 2 weeks'
Ooh,
time.
MLS. Yeah,
Um, or it might be 1 week.
I
Uh,
don't think they would race in
the
Italy on Easter
24th.
Sunday.
Yeah, 2 weeks.
2
So yeah,
weeks.
2 weeks time. So we'll go over all of that in
Mhm.
video in a couple of days. And until next time, thanks so much for watching or more listening, I suppose. And yeah, until next time, thanks and take care of yourselves.
Thanks, guys.